It's the Backyard Bible Study with your buddy Kevin Clay.
Okay, you talked me into it. Let's go ahead and get to the story of Jonah. This takes place somewhere between 800 750 BC. If you were with us for our last study, which actually was my first, actually it was about my 15th, but as far as what actually made it onto video, sorry, I'm slow at these things. Anyway, Jonah, you've got, this is a time, the Assyrians, the major power, and now Assyria's been rattled a little bit. They've got some northern kingdoms, and I can't remember what they were called, but it just come within about 100 miles of their northern border. So Assyria's dominance was being a little bit threatened at this time. Of course, the other big players, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Medes, Egypt, not so much a big player, but still pretty strong down in the south, had a desert protecting them. They were in good shape. So we've got this story of Jonah, and basically Assyria and Israel do not get along. Assyria is the biggest threat to Israel. In fact, God many times talks about Assyria, how that they are his rod to punish Israel. And you say, well, why would he punish Israel and not these other kingdoms? Well, let's look at it, because he's established Israel as these are the people who are supposed to be keeping his word. They are the ones to preserve his word, his presence. They're to be his mouthpiece, if you will, in this world, and of course to prepare the way for the Messiah. And so, yeah, he holds his people to a little higher standard, evidently, than just the general population. Now, kind of interesting though, that doesn't mean he doesn't care about other people, and that's what this whole book is about. And Jonah's failure to understand this, his whole thing is, look, we're your people. Why are you wanting to save these people who are oppressors? What do you care about them? And how he actually tries to thwart God's plans, that's never a good idea. You get the creator of the universe and you think you're going to pull one over on him, and it doesn't work out. So let's look at the book of Jonah from, once again, about the year 800 to 750 BC, or BCE for my Jewish buddies. Glad to have you along. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, go to the great city of Nineveh. This is the capital of Assyria. I'm thinking just what, 300 or 400 miles from where he is. It's inland. It's a good ways. You can't just hop over there. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. And this wasn't unusual. In the prophets of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, I guess these would be the Nabi'im, the prophets, there are several books that are written to the non-Israelites. I'm thinking, who was it? Obadiah was to Edom. You've got Nahum, which is another one, to Nineveh. And Jonah is to these Ninevites, to Assyria. So God tells him, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. So what does Jonah do? Yes, sir, right away. No. Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. This is exactly in the opposite direction. Whereas I mentioned Nineveh was inland, he actually takes a ship and heads, instead of going east, he heads west. When he went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. You're going to flee from the creator of the universe. What kind of prophet was this guy? Well, the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid and cried out to his own God. You know, not everybody worshiped this God. There were different people. They're crying out, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. You see that in a lot of movies. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. He's sleeping through the whole thing. The captain went to him and said, how can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us and we will not perish. This was a standard procedure too. Look, everybody, you call on your gods, you call on your gods. The Babylonians would even go so far, when they went and took over countries, as to steal the local gods and take them back to Babylon, so that those gods would watch over their city. This is just a local version of that. Then the sailors each said to each other, come, let us cast lots to find out who's responsible for this calamity. Evidently there's something supernatural about this storm. It's not like the usual, and they know something different's going on. There's a reason for this. So now they're casting lots, whatever that is. And they cast the lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, tell us, who's responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What's your country? From what people are you? They're all probably at the same time. You know, you must be really one bad hombre. Who'd you kill? He answered, I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord. And the word is capital, so he's saying the name Yahweh. I'm a Yahweh worshiper. The God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. Kind of clarifying that they're probably praying to their sea guides, and they're, okay, what point are we off of here? Find that land god and pray to him. He's saying, I worship the God who made everything. This terrified them, and they asked, what have you done? I mean, okay, you've got the biggest God ever, and he's after you. Once again, who'd you kill? What did you do? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he'd already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, what should we do to make the sea calm down for us? He says, pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Let's give Jonah a little credit there for some integrity. Instead of, we're going to ride this out. Come on, guys, I think we can make it to shore, all of us together. He realizes at this point, you can't run from God. If he's given you a task, if he's got something planned for you, you're not going to get away from him. And he at least has the decency to not want to drag these other people down to his fate. He figures God's going to kill him for what he's done. That's what he deserves. And if there's one thing we've seen even from the last study we had of Hosea, is that God usually doesn't give us what we deserve. Think about that. God doesn't give us what we deserve. He usually gives us much better. And so Jonah realizes, I deserve to die. I don't think he's figuring God's going to save him. Nobody ever heard of walking on water at this point. I think he figures, I'm a goner. Throw me overboard so, I'll be destroyed, you can live. Well, instead, and to the men's credit, they did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Now there's a little message. The harder they try to get toward land, the more the wind blows them back out to sea. Every time they try to row toward it, the storm picks up. That's got to make an impression. It says, then they cried out to the Lord, O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. And they're worried, okay, once again, to do this bad, you must have killed somebody, right? You can't just be running away. Maybe he didn't tell them something. And so now they're worried they'll be held accountable for taking someone's life. It says, do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, and they're using his name here. At least they've figured out that much. You, Yahweh, you've done as you pleased. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. Was this an instant thing? Was it a couple of minutes later? But the fact is, it did grow calm after they threw Jonah overboard, which I'm sure relieved them, because that tension, that doubt, are we going to be held accountable? Is it so bad that we're going to be held as an accomplice because we let him get on the boat? But once again, God is not just out to indiscriminately take life here. And interestingly enough, he's not even out to take Jonah's life. Let's see what happens here. Verse 16, once the sea grew calm. At this the men greatly feared the Lord and offered sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. I'm sure that did make an impression. Okay, we got it. Little sea gods and local land gods and nothing compared to this God. We get it. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah. It doesn't say a whale, just a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. All of chapter 2 now is Jonah praying while he's in this. Now, I know there's a lot of debate. Well, how did he know it was 3 days and 3 nights? Was he really in the inside of this fish? Was it a whale? Was it a UFO submarine? Well, let's just go with the story here. All I can tell you is what it says. He was inside some kind of fish. And you think about that. What happens if you're inside the digestive tract of something? Well, one thing, evidently, he upset this fish's delicate sensitivities. In verse 9, he's in chapter 2, he's still praying, says, but with a song of thanksgiving will I sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will make good. Salvation comes to the Lord. He's in this fish thinking, God, if I ever get out of here, I'll do what you said. It's you and me, Lord. Who's your buddy, huh? Says, and the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Well, there's a way to arrive at your destination. So he's upchucked onto the beach. And I'm thinking, and this is speculation on my part, I think, what do you look like when you've been in a fish's digestive system for 3 days? Would it dissolve the outer layer of skin, so now you're white, you're hairless, so you're looking like Powder, if you know who that is, that movie. Comes walking into town all white, no eyebrows, got a lobster hanging from his ear. I don't know, but it makes some kind of impression. I like this in chapter 3 now. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, go to the great city of Nineveh, and proclaim to it the message I give you. Little different approach, though, that Jonah takes this time. In verse 3, it says, Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Okay, you know, if God shows up and tells you something, I've never had this happen. One time I didn't have a vision on top of a mountain, and I know I keep telling you I'm going to tell you about that, and someday I will. The big vision I didn't have. I may do that next time. But God tells him this, and he realizes, I better do what God says. So, verse 3, Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord.